Good morning, friends. Today we commemorate the life and work of William Q. Judge, one of the founders of the Theosophical Society and a devoted servant to the Theosophical cause. Though his life was fairly brief, his influence in his work continues to be felt wherever Theosophy is studied and applied. Mr. Judge dedicated his life to helping restore the ancient wisdom tradition and making its principles practical in daily life. Through his writings, his guidance to students, and his tireless efforts to build the Theosophical movement in America, he sought to keep alive the spirit of universal brotherhood and the ideal of living Theosophy. So our purpose today is not only to remember his life historically, but also to reflect upon the principles he stood for and the example he set of steady work, devotion to truth, and service to humanity. So after the declaration, we'll get started with today's special program.
The United Lodge of Theosophists Declaration. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to limit the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Thanks.
And now we'll begin with some readings before a short biographical talk on Mr. Judge.
The first reading is from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, Devotion by Means of Faith. Krishna, those who worship me with constant zeal, with the highest faith and minds placed on me, are held in high esteem by me. But those who, with minds equal towards everything, with senses and organs restrained, and rejoicing in the good of all creatures, meditate on the inexhaustible, immovable, highest, incorruptible, difficult to contemplate, invisible, omnipresent, unthinkable, the witness, undemonstrable, should also come unto me. Those whose hearts are fixed on the unmanifested, the labor is greater, because a path which is not manifest is with difficulty attained by corporeal beings. But for those who worship me, renouncing in me all their actions, regarding me as the supreme goal and meditating on me alone, if their thoughts are turned to me, O son of Pritha, I presently become the savior from this ocean of incarnations and death. Place then thy heart on me, penetrate me with thy understanding, and thou shalt without doubt hereafter dwell in me. But if thou shouldst be unable at once steadfastly to fix thy heart and mind on me, strive then, O Dhananjaya, to find me by constant practice and devotion. If by constant practice thou art still unable Follow me by actions performed for me, for by doing works for me thou shalt attain perfection. But if thou art unequal even to this, then, being self-restrained, place all thy works, failures and successes alike, on me, abandoning in me the fruit of every action. For knowledge is better than constant practice, meditation is superior to knowledge, renunciation of the fruit of action to meditation, final emancipation immediately results from such renunciation. A devotee who is free from enmity, well disposed towards all creatures, merciful, wholly exempt from pride and selfishness, the same in pain and pleasure, patient of wrongs, contented, constantly devout, self-governed, firm in resolves, and whose mind and heart are fixed on me alone, is dear unto me. He also is my beloved, of whom mankind is not afraid, and who has no fear of man, who is free from joy, from despondency, and the dread of harm. A devotee who is unexpecting, pure, just, impartial, devoid of fear, and who had forsaken interest in the results of action, is dear unto me. He also is worthy of my love, who neither rejoiceth nor findeth fault, who neither lamenteth nor coveteth, and being my servant had forsaken interest in both good and evil results. He also is my beloved servant, who is equal-minded to friend and or foe, the same in honor and dishonor, in cold and heat, in pain and pleasure, and is unsolicitous about the events of things, to whom praise and blame are as one, who is of little speech, content with whatever cometh to pass, who hath no fixed habitation, and whose heart, full of devotion, is firmly fixed. But those who seek the sacred ambrosia, the religion of immortality, even as I have explained it, full of faith, intent on me above all others, and united devotion, are most beloved. Karina, you're on mute.
Thank you. Reading number 2 from the writings of Robert Crosby. Divinity is always acquired. It is not an endowment. It does not exist of itself. If we could be made good, if we could be made to turn around and take a righteous course, life might seem very much easier to us. But there is no escaping the law. No one can get us off from the effects of our wrongdoing. No one can confer knowledge on another. Each one has to see and know for himself. Each one has to gain divinity of himself and on his own way. We think of this as a common world, but it is not so. There are no two people who look at life from the same viewpoint, who have the same likes and dislikes, whom the same things affect in exactly the same way. No two people are alike either in life or after the death of the body. Each makes his own state, each makes his own limitations, each acquires his own divinity. Divinity lies latent in each one of us. All powers lie latent in everyone, and no being anywhere can be greater than we may become. What is divinity but all-inclusive knowledge? True spirituality is not a hazy condition. It is not something that denies any portion of the universe, nor any kind of being. A hazy abstract condition would mean no men, no principles, no opposites. But divine spirituality is the power to know and see whatever is wished, known, or seen. It is an intimate knowledge of the ultimate essence of everything in nature. Such knowledge would not mean seeing all things at once, nor being everywhere at the same time, but it is the power to see and know in any direction, the power to grasp whatever it wishes, the power to shut out whatever it wishes. All-inclusive knowledge lies before every living being, if he will but take the necessary steps. What prevents him are the false ideas he holds. For thought is the basis of all action, and wrong ideas in regard to life inevitably bring about wrong actions. We have thought we are all different because we have different ideas, but in essence, we are one. The one life is in each of us. Each one of us stands in the same position, looking out. All the rest are seen. Starting from this point, we begin to find ourselves, to see ourselves, to feel ourselves, and in feeling ourselves, feel all others. All that a man can know of God is what he knows in himself, through himself, and by himself. Never by any outside presentation can that realization be gained. All the great saviors of all times have never asked man to rely on some outside God, to fear some devil, to go by this or that revelation, to believe in any book, church, ology, or ism of any kind. They have asked him to take the step that the height of his calling demands, to know himself, to know his own true nature, and the nature of every other being. They have shown that the real man must assert himself and must act in accordance with his own nature, and the responsibility which the oneness of all nature demands. Man occupies the most important place in the whole scheme of evolution. He stands where spirit and matter meet. He is the link between the higher beings and those below. He has so to act, so to think and act, in and upon and with this physical matter that he raises it all up and gives it another tendency, another trend. By the very constitution of his nature, by reason of his being connected as he is in a physical body with all nature, the secret doctrine states that man can become greater than any one of the Dayan Chohans and equal to all of them put together. That is the goal which lies before him, the goal of the kingly mystery, the seeing and knowing and feeling and acting universally. For there is a power in man which enables him to judge aright. He has the all-seeing eye, the all-encompassing sight which permits him to see the justice of all things. And always there is present the power of choice in one direction or another. The questions before each human being are, whom will you serve? Will you serve the higher spiritual nature or the body of flesh? Whom choose ye this day? Thanks.
The third reading is excerpts from the writings of William Q. Judge. The question of duty is one that can be decided fully only by each individual himself. No code of laws or table of rules, unchanging and inflexible, will be given, under which all must act or find duty. Each man is the law unto himself, the law as to right and wrong, good and evil. No other individual may violate the law of that man any more than any other law. I dare not declare that any one thing or course is evil in another. For me, it may be evil. I am not wise enough to know what it is for another. Only the Supreme knows, for he only can read the heart, the mind, the soul of each. Thou shalt not judge, saith the sacred writing. He who seeks the small old path has many duties to perform. His duty to mankind, his family, nature, himself and his creator. But duty here means something very different from that which is conveyed by the time and lip-worn word duty. Our comprehension of the term is generally based upon society's or man's selfish interpretation. It is quite generally thought that duty means the performance of a series of acts which others think I ought to perform, whereas it more truly means the performance of actions by me which I know are good for others, or the wisest at the moment. Resist not evil, saith one of the wise. He who said this knew full well his duty, and desired to convey to us knowledge. That he did not mean men to sit idly by while ignorance let slip the dogs of pain, anguish and suffering, want and murder, is surely true. That he did not mean men to kneel in puerile simulation of holiness by the roadside while their fellow men suffer torture, wrong, or abuse is still more true. That he did not intend a man to sit silently a looker on while that which is called evil worked its will upon others, when by the lifting of a finger perhaps its intentions might be thwarted and annulled, is truth itself. These all would be neglect of a portion of the whole duty of man. He who taught that men should resist not evil desired them only to forget themselves. If want, sorrow, or pain comes to one, why resist or cry out? In the resistance or war against them, we create greater evils. Coming to oneself, they should have little weight, while at the same time they carry invaluable lessons in their hands. Rightly studied, they cause one to forget himself in the desire to assist others when similarly placed, and the lotus of duty, or love for man, to bloom out of the Nile mire of life. Resist not evil, for it is inseparable from life. It is our duty to live and accept uncomplainingly all of life. Resist not evil, but rather learn of it all the good which, in reality, it only veils. Seek in it, as well as in the gleaming good, for the mystery, and there will come forth from both the self-same form upon whose forehead is written duty, which being interpreted, meaneth efforts for the good of all other men, and over whose heart is written, I am my brother's keeper. Reading number 4, in memory of oh, sorry, you are going to do
after
gotcha.
After the biographical sketch. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, now we'll get into a short talk on William Q. Judge. In 1875, at the age of 24, William Q. Judge became a co-founder of the Theosophical Society, along with H.P. Blavatsky and Henry S. Alcott. Over the next 20 years, until his death in 1896, he continued to work ardently for the cause of Theosophy. As the leading theosophical influence in America from 1886 to 1896, Mr. Judge guided the American Theosophists such that it became the most vigorous section with the largest membership in the whole of the society. He relentlessly pursued a high vision for the society's work in the world, highlighting humanity's great need for a new perspective based on universal brotherhood. Mr. Judge was born in Dublin, Ireland on April 13, 1851, to Frederick H. Judge and Alice Mary Kwan. Sadly, his mother died giving birth to her 7th child, and his father decided in 1864 to emigrate to New York with his 6 children. Judge studied law while living with his father in New York. The father, unfortunately, also died soon thereafter. So at 21, Mr. Judge became a U.S. citizen, and in 1872, he was admitted to the New York State Bar. He married Ella M. Smith, a school teacher, in 1874, and they lived in Brooklyn for a few years until they moved into New York City proper. Judge's father had been deeply interested in Freemasonry, and Judge was also interested in religion, magic, and Rosicrucianism. In 1874, Mr. Judge thought to look into spiritualism. It was very prominent during that time, and he found Colonel Alcott's book, People from the Other World. So he wrote to Alcott asking him for the address of a good medium. Alcott replied that he did not then know any, but that he had a friend, a Madame Blavatsky, who asked for Mr. Judge to call on her. And so he did so. He called on Madame Blavatsky at 46 Irving Place in New York and made her acquaintance. And he said it was her eye that caught me. The time between meeting HPB in 1875 and the publication of Isis Unveiled in 1877 was a truly remarkable one for Judge. He studied with and learned from HPB while she lived in New York. He also met and stayed close, corresponding with Damodar K. Mavalankar, and that he later wrote to Damodar that HPB had made possible the glorious hours spent listening to the words of those illuminated ones who came often late at night when all was still, and talked to H.S. Alcott and myself by the hour. So he also had this connection with the masters that HPB was the agent of. He was deeply influenced by them and the ideal of masters of wisdom as living men. After the signing for the contract for publishing Isis Unveiled, HPB announced that she must go to India, as she had always said she would. Unlike Alcott, Mr. Judge was in no position to go with HPB because of his obligations to his wife and daughter. And in researching this talk, this is the first I found that he was pretty upset that he wasn't able to go. And for a time, he didn't visit HPB, but the two sort of made up this little breach that about her going off to India before she left. And then Mr. Judge, around the same time, lost his daughter to diphtheria. And so these were both severe blows to him. And he wrote to Colonel Alcott in India that often there is much sorrow and longing in my heart after the little one gone away. For several years before Judge started The Path magazine, he had longed to go to India and give himself entirely to the service of the masters. But he was a young married man and not yet established in his profession of commercial law. But by 1884, which is quite a few years later, his situation changed and it looked as though his dream could be realized. He left initially for Europe and stopped in Paris on his way to India in order once again to see HPB and Colonel Alcott. She invited him to assist her on the secret doctrine. And so he stayed there and worked with her for a little over 3 months before setting sail for India. He lectured at several places and went to the society's headquarters at Adyar, where he expected to remain for the rest of his life. But before Judge departed for India, he received the following message from one of the masters. It said, "As I expect to see you in Adyar, let me impress you well with the fact that much of the society's future welfare depends on your tact, discretion, and zeal. As you sow, so will you reap. It is the infatuated conduct of some of the board in Adyar that developed into well-foreseen reverses. Go then and save the cause by saving the society. Fear not, I will see you helped." Once Judge got to India and remembering this message, it became clear that his real work was not in India, it was in America. So he returned forthwith a new man, one who knew his direction and pursued it with vigor. When Judge resumed active work in America in the mid-1880s, the Theosophical movement there had nearly disappeared. But through tireless effort, lecturing, correspondence, writing, and organizing, he rebuilt the American section until it became the largest and most active part of the society. Where before theosophical work in the United States had languished, now study centers and branches began to spring up. An informal vehicle for the expression of theosophical teachings and their use in daily living was really needed, along with a more broadened view of the world's religious and philosophical heritage. And so he began the Path magazine to become a vehicle for theosophical thought and literature in America, and to spread broadcast the theosophical teachings and ideas. The effects of the previous 7 years of trial, for him, they truly were on Judge's physical being, on his psyche, and these changes were obvious to a Mr. A.E.S. Smith, who was with Mr. Judge on the steamer back to New York from India. He looked old and pallid, and had I been told his age was 33, I would have said it was 20 years out, Mr. Smith had said in the Canadian Theosophists. But as we know, once Judge returned to New York, not only did he get the Theosophical Society going again, he joined a law firm where Colonel Alcott's brother worked. So he continued to earn his living in the field of law, commercial law, until the last 2 years of his life, when his health became poor and he was supported by the American Theosophical Society. But once he was reestablished in law, he put his energies into promoting theosophy. He revitalized the work going on in New York, reorganizing it under its original charter, named the Aryan Theosophical Society of New York. He held regular meetings, he started a theosophical lending library, and he launched the printing of inexpensive literature, books, and pamphlets. In 1886, along with Arthur Gebhard, he founded the Path magazine, and Judge was editor, and Gebhard was business manager. And this later became the official organ of the American Theosophical Society. So he would practice law during the day, but in the evenings, he worked far into the night, writing almost every article himself under various pen names. He rarely placed himself in the forefront publicly. He really stayed behind the scenes doing all this writing and corresponding to many theosophists. Much of the writing in the Path appeared under pseudonyms, and many readers were unaware that he was responsible for a large portion of the magazine. But his concern was always that the teachings be studied and applied rather than attention fall on any personality, including his own. Quote, he was the most unassuming of men, and yet those who came near him felt a strength and a quiet power. Despite all these responsibilities as a lawyer and organizer, he devoted countless hours to answering letters from students seeking advice. We've all seen letters that have helped me and how practical they are. Under his guidance, moves were made to unite in thought and action the membership scattered across the United States. So he himself would travel to lodges and be the primary speaker, but eventually he placed 3 full-time traveling lecturers in the field to go to struggling groups, to support established centers, to just spread broadcast the teachings of Theosophy. And the Path magazine, leaflets and pamphlets, specialized small ones on specific topics, were regularly circulated among the membership, keeping everyone in touch with one another and the headquarters in New York. Local speakers were encouraged to start new centers in nearby communities. And at the time of like 1886, there was about a dozen branches. But by 1896, 10 years later, there were over 100 branches. So his influence was very broad. And it was due not only to his organizational ability, but also to the personal qualities that many students remembered about him long after he passed from the scene. His kindness, his patience, and he had a quiet strength. Though he was burdened by heavy responsibilities and often in poor health, he continued to work tirelessly, answering letters, writing articles, traveling to new groups, and emphasizing, above all, that the practical living of theosophical principles in daily life. HPB, at the second annual convention, she penned a letter to be read to the American Convention. At her request, she called Judge the heart and soul of the TS in America, saying that it is to you chiefly, if not entirely, that this Theosophical Society owes its existence in 1888. Again, in a letter dated 1889 from London concerning Judge and the American work, she spoke of him as part of herself since several eons, the Antascarana bridge between the two monases, the American thought and the Indian, or rather the trans-Himalayan esoteric knowledge. So those were very profound things for her to say about him and to include Judge and to recognize his efforts in America. By 1887, members had asked Mr. Judge if esoteric work might be established, so he wrote to HPB in May suggesting such a move. She recommended they wait, but sometime early in 1888, HPB had a conversation with the masters about the general state of the TS. And she was told that although the TS work in Adyar ran like a machine, it didn't have as much like soul response, and that matters had reached such a point that the master's influence upon the TS there was no longer possible, and that they had to some extent let it go. So with this, HPB responded to Judge and proposed an esoteric section based on the original lines set forth by the masters. In London, HPB and Alcott issued a joint announcement about the formation of an esoteric section in the October and November issues of Lucifer, to the effect that an intersection of the work was to be started under her direction, to be organized on the original lines devised by the real founders of the TS. After The Secret Doctrine was published, HPB invited Judge to go to London, and together they drew up the rules of the esoteric section. And Judge thereafter conducted it in America as secretary to HPB. He possessed a rare gift for presenting the profound ideas of Theosophy in clear and practical language. Works such as Echoes from the Orient, The Ocean of Theosophy, and Letters That Have Helped Me became the guiding texts for students because they emphasize the ethical and practical application of the philosophy in daily life. In 1889, members of the Aryan branch TS purchased a press and secured the services of someone to operate it. So aside from the pamphlets, publications included 3 small magazines, Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, Judge's Echoes from the Orient, his recension of the Bhagavad Gita with introduction and footnotes, Letters That Have Helped Me, and The Ocean of Theosophy. It was estimated that 500,000 flyers had been printed in this effort. So it was like really active and very, very busy. After HPB passed away in 1891, Mr. Judge and Annie Besant jointly headed the esoteric section. As American General Secretary, and later in addition as Vice President of the TS, Judge continued to concentrate on the American work. He spoke on Theosophy at the Parliament of Religions at the Chicago World's Fair, and then the following year at the Religious Parliament of San Francisco's Midwinter Fair. So all these efforts, he was spreading broadcast Theosophy to many people, and it just wherever he spoke, it seemed that there was like a revitalized effect. Judge had always been sensitive to the master's influence, and he received messages from them at times in his own handwriting and at times in theirs. There were, however, those who accused him of sending fraudulent messages. Judge consistently emphasized that Theosophy must be lived, not merely studied. He said Theosophy must be lived as well as studied, and do not imagine that knowledge alone will save you. Life must be purified. And these reflect kind of his central message. I think the more he became prominent, there was always, those who were critical. But he was such an exemplar that it was really hard to find anything. The accusations were pretty baseless. And it's unfortunate, but I guess that's part of what happens when someone, really lives the life and has an effect on a large group of people. So he had to sort of withstand these criticisms in a theosophical way, not responding harshly, but not letting them pass either. And he was like an exemplar of doing that. Because he applied Theosophy so much in practical life, in his daily life. He continued his theosophical work, but the years of these ceaseless efforts, combined with the effects of the Chagres fever he contracted in Venezuela before he went to India, finally took their toll. And he passed away on March 21st, 1896, just short of his 45th birthday. His last words were, "There should be calmness, hold fast, go slow." He was also known to have said, "Work, watch, and wait." A theosophist and summed up Mr. Judge thus: "No figure rises out of the dim limbo of that recent, though already distant past, with a more engaging presence than that of this handsome Irish American. And I venture to say that in a movement which has been a forcing house for greatness, no one developed such power, such capacity, such insight in so short a space of time when the pressure was put upon him as Mr. Judge," unquote. There is abundant evidence, aside from the best evidence of all, the fruitfulness of his labors, that he was under the direct guidance of the masters. One wrote of Mr. Judge, quote, when the presence is upon him, he knows well that which others only suspect and divine." In the same letter, he is referred to as the one who of all chelas suffers the most and demands or even expects the least, unquote. He was a man of exquisite sympathy and gentleness. Stern with himself, he was lenient toward others. Mr. Kitely had said that, quote, "Judge made the life portrayed by Jesus realizable to me." He was that rare and beautiful thing, a practical mystic. To conclude, one of his last messages to his intimate band of followers was that they should learn by actual experience that occult development comes best, quickest, and safest in the punctilious fulfillment of the small duties of everyday life. So that concludes the biographical sketch of his life and work. And then we'll have one more reading before we can open up for discussion.
The reading is In Memory of William Q. Judge by Robert Crosby from Theosophy Magazine, Volume 10, page 131, published in March 1922. Speaking of Mr. Judge as anybody might have known him, as a human being like ourselves, he was humble, unassuming, modest, strong, patient, meek, courageous, an organizer beyond comparison, with powers similar to those possessed by HBB, and never using them in any way but to smooth the path for those who desired to follow the road of knowledge. He was kind and patient, as we do not often find, with tremendous forcefulness. He had extraordinary powers of organization, with a perception that could look into the very motives and minds of others, could see traitors among him, could read the hearts of those desirous of injuring him, and yet in all his intercourse with them, paving the way for them, remaining ever kind. For the one who most injured him, he had only this to say when friends about him spoke their denunciations. Quote, "Never mind what others do. Put no one out of your heart. Go on with the work you see. Work will tell in time, and all these follies of others, follies of ignorance, will fall to nothing. Then, when the time comes, we will all have gained strength. When those who have fallen away for a while come back, there we will be with open arms, as strong brothers, to help them find the path and smooth out the effects of errors that have been created through ignorance." Unquote.
Thank you. That concludes the official part of the program. So now we can open it up to any questions or comments, or just to be social.
As the older students used to say, renew the bonds of fellowship. In that last quote, I found it interesting where it says that he was both meek and forceful, right? Meek and courageous. You don't usually see those like in the same description of the same person.
Yeah, he was kind of enigmatic like that. I think he was good at striking that balance. And you can really see his focus on universal brotherhood in that last reading, where, you know, he knows those who depart will be back, and he'll be there with open arms. Like, you know, no fault, no foul, just everyone's doing their best, and, you know, focused on brotherhood as much as possible.
I noticed one small detail. Of course, there are so many in the life you described of William Q. Judge. But you mentioned that 1875 to 77 was very important because he had already known a few years back Madame Blavatsky, but he was involved in, I don't know if he was directly involved in the publishing of ISIS, but 1875, he was already in the movement, Theosophical movement. And that's what the philosophy says, that the 25 years before the closing of a century, there's an impulse for that helps or attracts people to the study of theosophy. So that's consistent with what happened with William Conn Judge. It was the quarter of the century, 19th century, where he became very involved, although his intentions and his propensities were established way before, when he was attracted to Rosicrucians through his father about Freemasonry and all that. But 75, I think it was when the impulse really was what directed him and got him involved, let's say officially, right?
Yes. Yeah, there is, it has been written about that there is an effort the last 25 years of the past, I believe, 7 centuries. It's called the 7th century impulsion. It began with Tsongkhapa, that there's an effort to bring this wisdom to humanity, and it's taken different forms. But in 1875, it was the Theosophical movement where the word Theosophy was used, and ideas of karma and reincarnation were brought to the West, widely circulated through Theosophy. So that was definitely a watershed time period. And yeah, Mr. Judge and H.P. Blavatsky were at the center of that. I researched different things about Judge's life, and I took a little bit of a different approach this time. I hadn't heard, for instance, that that he was upset he couldn't go to India initially, but it makes total sense. He was so inspired by HPB and the masters and the movement that he didn't want to separate from them. But once he realized what his role was in the movement, everything sort of expanded quickly from there once he found his groove. I hadn't heard that before, but it makes total sense. And also that the branches could be influenced by the masters depending on their openness and the qualities of the people. And it went through different cycles in different areas. But clearly what was happening on the American side was really where the majority of the branches opened up, and there was, spread like wildfire, so to speak. He really, he walked the walk as well, lived the life. So, and that showed, so it was very consistent, and that impulse, worked through him. He was active in spreading the master's influence through a big part of the world. So, he really just stayed focused from that moment on.
Yeah, so for this student, Judge is a bridge between some of the most abstract writings such as the Secret Doctrine. The ocean is so simple, forms a really good bridge, as well as the notes on the Gita too. It really distills it down in simple and practical terms.
Yeah, it shows how well he understood the Gita, had such a grasp on it, of the deeper meaning behind the words. And yeah, his writings are just so approachable. Just every day, and explains some of these high concepts that we see in the Secret Doctrine, like Mula Prakriti or things like that, he just made it more accessible.
Yes, exactly.
You didn't have to be super high-minded to understand it, and encourage those who hadn't heard of these high concepts to like dig in a little further and learn a little more.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that stood out to me is that he wasn't just like studious. He was, it said he was a practical mystic.
Mm-hmm.
Just really applying all these things to himself too. This biographical sketch didn't get into the borrowed body, but we probably all remember that from past years, that he may have the body of William Q. Judge as a child got really sick, and that the boy may have passed away, and Mr. Judge may have come to occupy the body as an entrant on the scene.
Mm-hmm. And also his quality of meekness also intrigued the student, because keep in mind that not only was he forceful and a good speaker, but he also was an attorney. So he was arguing in the court, and I always wondered how those two qualities could mesh, being meek and also being a forceful lawyer. So
I think as a lawyer you have to be strategic and logical, and lead the case step by step. And I think all those skills, I don't know where he got them first, in Theosophy and he applied them in law, or in law and applied them in Theosophy, but they work both ways. And also, a lawyer has to present in front of a judge. He has to be a good speaker. I think Mr. Judge was an excellent speaker.
I thought I saw a quote somewhere. He was known amongst his peers as Jesus of the bar.
Really?
Because he just took this, sort of saintly approach to being a lawyer.
That's in keeping with his personality and temperament.
Yeah.
I hadn't known, he did go to South America, where he got that Chagas fever, I guess, in Venezuela. He went there to work on some way to make money so that he could go to India. I hadn't realized that. I hadn't heard that before. So he went to a lot of effort to try to secure a living so that he could go to India and retire there and continue the work. But then he got that message from the master that, your place is really in America. And by the time he got to India, it had all fallen in place that he needed to be in America. So it must have been difficult for him, because he worked so hard to get to the point where he could go there to supposedly retire and work full-time for Theosophy, and that is not what happened.
Kathy, you said that William Judge went to Venezuela. Is that right?
Yeah, he did.
Wow.
I forget the exact year, but I think he went to South America twice.
Interesting. Very interesting.
He did write some articles about how every nation, every region has a history of wise men like adepts, and they were in all parts of the world, and one isn't to think that you have to go to the Himalayas, just, you know, that they're within daily life among us. I just looked it up. He went to Caracas, Venezuela in 1881.
What year again?
1881. He contracted a tropical disease, likely Chagas disease, that affected his health for the rest of his life. Yeah, I guess it is one of those things where it can flare up or something, like a long-term type of thing. Yeah, well, if there aren't any more thoughts or questions, we can break a few minutes early. Just a reminder, I'll be sending out the Zoom link for the Interlodge Symposium Wednesday night, the 18th at 7:30. It's going to be a similar presentation, but the program's going to be broken up by people at different lodges, and in an effort to just work together and be cohesive. And that should take place Wednesday night, 7:30 to about 8:45.